it's so inspiring. It's so incredible because you really did start this movement, and it's incredible what you've done. But you talk about being scared going up against, the beer companies. I would be scared going up against any of these big corporations because they all have a lot of money. And I can't imagine that you didn't have moments where you were really scared. Didn't you get death threats at one point? Like, weren't there some dark stuff that actually happened as well?
Yes, it was actually the most trying time of my life, I would say,
Yeah.
beyond like the sicknesses that I had as a child, and then ending up in hospital with surgery a few times. Like, other than those times, like, I would say this period was the most insane, because here's what was happening, kind of laying down like the environment that was going down. My first book was coming out, and it hit the New York Times bestseller list.
I
Time
remember that.
magazine, Time magazine named me one of the most influential people on the internet,
Mm-hmm.
next to like Kim Kardashian and Barack Obama and Jimmy Fallon. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, what? Like, this is
Yes,
insane, right?
you should have
And
been number one.
oh, well, thank you. But
Seriously.
um, I, I just, all of these accolades were happening one after the other, and the food industry was like going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Like, they were
Mm-hmm.
just so mad about this. They were doing whatever they could to throw as much mud my way as possible. And so
Mm-hmm.
anytime a reporter would write a positive article for me, that media outlet would immediately get attacked by like online trolls that were actually controlled, I found out, by Monsanto's program, which they had
Yes.
a program that was, and if for people listening, if you don't know what Monsanto is, now they're Bayer, but they were the people responsible for creating genetically engineered organisms and the chemical called Roundup that has
Yeah.
glyphosate in it and has now been implicated into causing cancer in hundreds of court cases across the United States right now. And
Yeah.
this is a very toxic chemical being sprayed on our food. It was one of the things that I was actively campaigning against. And it was one of the things that I took my delegation status for the National Democratic Convention and protested in front of the Secretary of Agriculture with like labeled GMO signs. And I used my status to like go for this issue. And they did not like that, right? How I was able to get all of this press and media attention for these issues and talk
Mm-hmm.
about the detrimental effects of their chemicals that they were spraying on our food. And at the time, there was also this huge Proposition 37 that was in California, where we were we were we were campaigning to get California to label genetically engineered organisms anytime you would buy processed food. And they defeated that, actually, with the help of big food companies paying
Mm-hmm.
for and using a lot of illegal things that happened, because it definitely, I think it would have passed had they not used kind of the force of big food to stop the legislation. But they were very mad at what I was doing because, again, had this big army of people educating people, and they did not like that. And so they had this program called Leave No Comment Left Behind. And so
Ah.
anytime somebody would say something about me on the internet, like anything positive, sharing anything, they would immediately go find it. And then there would be like 100 comments. She's pseudoscientific. She's a fear
Ah.
monger. She's crazy. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And they try to do that in the media too. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember there was this article that came out just around that time as well. It was in the New York Times, and it was a whole profile piece on me. And they sent a photographer down, took a picture of me, and it was like this great moment, of 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 just attention on me all of a sudden, which I loved being in the media when it came to talking about the food industry, but I didn't like this sudden attention on me and who I am,
Yeah.
right? Because it was just like, wait a minute, this conversation is not about me and who I am. This
Right.
conversation is about the food industry that's poisoning us right now, right?
Yeah.
And they know it, and they're doing it for profit, and this has got to stop. And so they wanted to change the conversation, and so they paid quote unquote independent experts
Mm-hmm.
to come against me, and they make it look like I'm nobody with no credentials versus all
Yep.
of these scientists and doctors. And so
Yep.
in this article in the New York Times, I remember sitting down with the reporter, and she was saying, what do you think about all these scientists that are against you? I go, they're being paid by the food industry, look into it. And
Yep.
she didn't look into it, she didn't report on it. And the people she quoted in this article, I couldn't even believe the corruption involved. One of the guys' names
Mm.
was Fergus Clydesdale. Guess who he was? He was on the board of Sensient Technologies, the company that makes caramel color level 4. Okay. And
That's
I
how it
had just,
always is.
I know, I had just taken on Starbucks and the fact that they were using this artificial coloring in their pumpkin spice lattes. And they were actually
Yeah.
forced to remove it and
Yeah.
release their ingredients for the first time in history. For the
I
longest
remember
time,
that.
you didn't know what you were drinking when you were drinking a pumpkin spice latte.